Reducing waste by planning less seems like a stupid thing for a project manager to say, but the world is littered with project after project that have failed, even though they spent enormous effort planning every step of the way. They were just not resilient enough. Their plans were brittle because they could not overcome the challenges they faced. Here is a list of some notable ones, sometimes going into the billions of dollars. Some people believe that Abraham Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll use the first 4 sharpening the axe." Notice that he did not say that he would use the first 4 hours to work out where and when he would chop. My takeaway was that he valued the effectiveness of the tool more than the detailed plan, and this is what my talk is about. My talk today is called Reduce Waste by Planning Less. I gave this talk to the Project Management Institute monthly chapter last year and also to the Agile Brisbane meetup group. Both talks were well received, and for the PMI talk, I received the rating of 4.9 out of 5 for the relevance of the talk and audience engagement. I thought it would be useful to record it onto YouTube so that I can get your feedback. I've divided the presentation into 2 parts. The first part, called Guidelines, covers key patterns that I find useful in my career. And the second part is where I provide an example delivery at QUT, which showcases a practical application of these principles through a project that I delivered there. If there was one question that one could ask that could allow you to determine if a person was likely to have a traditional mindset or an agile one, then what question would that be? What question could you ask? For me, the question is, what caused the last project failure that you experienced? A traditionally minded person is more likely to say, of course it had to fail. Look at how little time was spent on the detailed plan. In contrast, an agile-minded person might say that the project fails because the delivery vehicle was not flexible and resilient enough to overcome the obstacles the project faced. As we move more into a VUCA world, the level of disruption is likely to increase. So VUCA, for those of you that don't know, stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. In such a world, resilience is crucial. Any plan we make is imperfect, and some stakeholders may be missed. The business landscape might evolve, tasks might take longer, and unidentified dependencies exist. These uncertainties should not just be noted in the risk register, but should become part of our DNA, core elements, central to the way in which we do things, not just add-ons. One of our Australian thought leaders that I followed is Gojko Adzik, who spoke at the YAR conference in Melbourne. I was particularly impressed by his talk, Make Impacts Not Software, which resonated with me, and especially his metaphor about a holiday trip between London and Berlin, and that's via Paris. He suggested that you could plan the trip using a traditional mindset or one that is focused on resilience and adaptability. The traditional approach would involve developing a detailed itinerary for each day and then securing the tickets and resources for each. Invariably, things don't go as planned. There is a strike on the day you want to visit the Louvre, or it's raining when you want to walk down the Champs-Élysées. An alternative approach is focused on resilience. You can build flexibility into the plan. Ideally, identify the must-have experiences and leave the rest flexible. Buy seasons tickets, book a rental car. Make sure you spend time each day to check out what is happening in your area. One way you could build resilience is to understand directional decisions. I got this concept from one of our Australian thought leaders, Tony Ponton. He suggested that a powerful way to understand organizations is that they primarily deliver decisions, not products, and that you can be a lot more resilient if you are intentional about how you make decisions. He divides decisions into 2 types: Directional and non-directional. Imagine a river flowing from the top of the snowy mountains. At the watershed, a meter can mean the difference between flowing into the Tasman Sea or the Southern Ocean. Once a river has started its journey, it's really difficult to reverse direction and go the other way. These decisions are directional because they are difficult to reverse. An example in the construction industry is the decision to locate a building on a particular site. Once the work has started to dig the foundations, it is costly to decide to move the building to a different site. Similarly, once the river is flowing towards the sea, a decision to move the river a meter to the left or right can be easily corrected downstream. These are called non-directional decisions. An example from the construction industry is the choice of a plumbing contractor. If the contractor is not performing, then it should be relatively easy to replace them with a suitable alternative. Now, the interesting fact I've discovered is that the number of directional decisions on a project tend to be much less than the number of non-directional decisions. So if you can identify the directional decisions early, spend time on them so that you can get them right, and postpone the non-directional decisions as long as possible, then you can make your project much more resilient in a number of ways. Firstly, every time you change the decision that you have made, you need to redo the work associated with that decision and the decisions that are dependent on it. If you reduce the number of decisions you have to make, then the cost of changing your mind is lower. When projects make non-directional decisions early in the project, they are doing so when the project knows the least about the outcome. As the project evolves and you learn more, then your decisions are likely to be more accurate. Decisions are more powerful and are more likely to be correct when they are made by the people who are responsible for implementing them, or who are most likely to be affected by them. This is much easier to do when these decisions are delayed until when they are needed, and teams are much more likely to be empowered as a result of that. The biggest challenge to the approach I've taken is that business executives want to know what they are getting for their investment in the project. The traditional approach is to resolve this by developing detailed requirements and then determining the amount of effort to deliver. By locking in all of the directional and non-directional decisions up front, they believe that the certainty this provides will reduce risk. My contention is that this is an illusion and actually increases risk rather than reduces it. So does this mean that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater and don't provide any estimation? Not at all. The trick is to realize that all estimations are bad guesses based on what we know at the time. Look around you in the room you're in and find a table. Can you guess how long that table is in meters? Take a guess now. Was it easy? And how accurate do you think your guess was? Now try a different approach. Guess how many lengths of that table you can fit in the room. Was that easier? Was it more accurate? Studies show that most people found the second method easier and more accurate. This is because the human mind is better at guessing things in comparison to other things rather than coming up with raw numbers. Use this approach to make an estimation of the size of the product to be delivered on any of the projects that you're working on, and adjust as you go. By keeping the work atomic and delivering whole completed items, you can chop and change as you go to accommodate new insights and challenges while you keep true to the original vision. Far too many times in my career, I've found organizations that have a preference for big bang delivery. The idea is that you define and build a future state in one go. The organization operates one way until go live and then switches over to an entirely different way at the specified time. The argument being that incremental delivery is too hard. Users that are asked to change every few days suffer from change fatigue. Solutions need to be constantly, rigorously tested to identify anything that might have broken the last time round, and marketing can't create any hype on an increment so small that there is more of a fizzle than a bang. For some reason, organizations convince themselves that big bang deliveries are lower risk because they can plan for all eventualities and have people on standby to help during hypercare. Change management plans can prepare for the day by hyping everyone up for the big event. This too is a myth. Big bang deliveries are often more risky because they don't allow for the fast feedback loops that allow you to course correct before it's too late. One example of this that comes to mind for me is the relationship between two products developed by the same company, Google. One is Google Wave and the other is Gmail. Google invested millions of dollars in each, and both aimed to revolutionize email. One was a spectacular success, and the other one a spectacular failure. So what was the difference between the two? Google Wave needed users to transition from email to Google Wave as a big bang, i.e. stop using one solution, email, and start using their solution, Wave. Whereas Gmail was delivered as a series of very small incremental adjustments over time, making your experience incrementally better with each change. There are numerous techniques for avoiding big bang deliveries. I've given a talk on the strangler pattern as one example, to be uploaded soon to YouTube. So what else can you do to build resilience into your delivery? Here are some sense and respond mechanisms that have helped me. The first one is to acknowledge that everybody makes assumptions when we're building something. So make sure that you identify what your assumptions are from the start and acknowledge the possibility that they are wrong. Try and find experiments that validate them and don't assume that the answer won't change over time. The second one is that every organization has someone who challenges the status quo. Don't shut these people out. They are your canary in the coal mine. Cherish them, especially if they raise their challenges respectfully. A chaos monkey is an automated mechanism to test resilience of a data center. It randomly injects pulses and commands through different ports and takes down key components, all to check the resilience of the overall system. Whether it's with people or automated system, responding to a disruption is what makes your solution strong and resilient. And when you've identified the need for a change, don't delay. From that moment onwards, any step forward is waste. One critical success factor that I've found is to choose carefully who you choose to work with. Are they willing to make your goals their goals, or are they just in it to separate you from your cash before moving on? And the way in which we construct our agreements can have a huge impact on how that relationship works. And then one item that brings it all together is to identify those incremental slices carefully and empower your cross-functional teams to deliver them. This provides them with autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and is a significant contributor towards high-performing teams. I've completed the first part of the presentation, which describes some of the principles you can apply to make your solutions more resilient. The next part of my presentation is to take you through a practical case study of my delivery of the Student ID Card project to the Queensland University of Technology, or QUT. The Student ID Card project was one of the projects I delivered to QUT as part of the HiQ program. The purpose of the HiQ program was to transform the relationship between the QUT service organization and its students. Before my project, student intake involved students queuing for hours in queues that wrapped around the building to get their photos taken for their ID cards. Not ideal for an organization on the forefront of technology innovation. The HiQ program identified a few key outcomes that would change the dynamic and commissioned the SIDC project to deliver them. These were to allow for students to capture their own pictures and to self-serve the application. The challenges facing this included the need to validate that they were who they said they were, to streamline the approval process, and to integrate the results with the QUT network and building access identities. QUT also had an aging identity management system that had been built over 10 years that needed to be replaced. So how does this work traditionally? Normally projects spend time collecting requirements, which involves a business analyst asking all of the key stakeholders what they want and then writing those requirements down. If they are sophisticated, then they might even conduct a Moscow analysis on these to tease out the must-haves from the rest. Whilst this approach seems reasonable on paper, it relies on the business analyst having a complete and sophisticated understanding of what the users will respond to best, and also how the various products in the market solve the problems to be addressed. I've seen far too many times that this depth is not present at the start and only becomes visible later on when the cost to change is high. What actually happens is that vendors price in the cost of customizing their products to meet the requirements into their RFT responses, rather than proposing a different way to reach the underlying outcome. This is because tenders are scored on conformance to requirements, not outcomes. The result is often several times more expensive. The process then quietly validates the cost. 6 or 7 responses in the same range make a high price look like the market rate. And not every single project manager, is a neutral party in this. I have watched simple projects grow into large programs, not because the program demanded it, but because a bigger program is worth more on a resume and supports a higher rate next time. Faced with the choice between a cheaper approach and a more comfortable one, some will steer the conversation and the customer to the comfortable one. The vendor wins too, because every upgrade becomes a costly exercise to reapply the customizations. Everyone wins except the customer, who carries the bill. I took a different approach at QUT. The first step is the most important. No project is successful without an empowered guiding coalition of the willing. This needs to include frequent empowerment by those people most affected by the outcome and those whose authority can unblock any obstacles. Getting these people together and agreeing what good looks like is half the battle won even before you start. At QUT, I was privileged to have a product owner and executive group that provided me with the autonomy I needed and responded to my escalations to remove roadblocks and validate our products. This was a key success factor for the project. The next step I took was to get a good view of the current landscape. What currently works and what doesn't? What tools are in place and how mature are they? What is the customer experience like? What is the competition up to? Every company thinks that their problems and their environment are so unique that it's not like any other company. This is another illusion, and I believe is a direct result of collecting or developing detailed requirements too early. By keeping the definition of the outcome at as high a level as possible, and to have a look at how other organizations have solved the problem and achieved good results. You won't be tied down by a specific way of doing it. If a product exists that can solve your problem, then it can be much cheaper than building your own. So getting a sense of what is out there is important. At QUT, we analyzed a wide range of products and even did site visits to other organizations, but realized that there were a few key elements that QUT needed that were not present in any of these solutions. So we had to take a different approach. After studying the technical architecture at QUT of their systems, I noticed that we could achieve the outcomes needed and even retire the old identity system without adding any new systems. Their existing intranet could be used to collect requests, and their service management system could be used to provide approvals. All that was needed was to build integration between these, their digital identities and their physical access systems, and the project outcomes could be achieved. I then looked at ways of applying the principles I discussed earlier in this presentation to build resilience. The first step was to separate out the key outcomes the project wanted to achieve into separate milestones. The goal was for each milestone to take a step towards the end outcome and provide meaningful real-world features that could be used immediately. Other than getting some of the benefits early, this meant that we could see how well the features were working and adjust the roadmap accordingly. My next step was to secure my dream team. I was very lucky to have been given the opportunity and autonomy to spin up my own team by writing the job profiles for the team and to interview and engage the team members. This meant that I could select people who not only had the right skills and experience, but people who had the right mindset and approach to work. The team I selected was amazing and played a big part in the success of the project. They acted in a truly collaborative way and cross-functional way, each accommodating the strengths and weaknesses of the others and delivered to a common outcome. Sometimes it's better to get people who have not been contaminated by traditional approaches and are willing to do things differently. For the mobilization, I used techniques developed by the remote.af framework that was developed here in Brisbane and has some great approaches to building high-performing teams quickly. With this solid foundation, it was possible to move forward with much higher confidence and lower risk, learning as we went and tracking the many challenges as they came up. By learning and pivoting as we went, we could accommodate disruption and eliminate waste. When the project started, we were convinced that we needed to implement self-service kiosks where students could print and collect their student cards. When we saw how students were interacting with our internet features, we realized that the kiosks would be a waste and that we removed them from the roadmap. In the end, we settled on 5 key milestones that delivered all of the outcomes we needed. By measuring our delivery velocity, we were able to determine which sprints were moving quickly and which ones had issues. This allowed us to have meaningful discussions in our retrospective sessions and have good metrics to raise with the executive team. A key focus area was our dependence on other teams in the program providing elements we needed on time. Where they were delayed, we could work on other high-value items until they caught up. Early visibility and communication was the key. Our lightweight solution enabled the seamless retirement of a legacy system, ensuring zero disruption. The project was completed months ahead of schedule, demonstrating efficiency and project resilience. The SRDC project contributed to the HiQ program receiving the IT SMF's Enterprise Service Management Implementation of the Year, highlighting its excellence and positive impact. So if I had to leave you with 4 things to take away from this presentation, these would be the ones. That resilience is achieved through high-level long-term planning. So in other words, keep your long-term planning very high level and only do detailed planning for the very short term. So make sure that your decision making is delegated to those who are closest to the work. This not only means that you're able to make better decisions, but also to have a team that is a lot more empowered and contributes heavily towards the team being high performing. Make sure that your change process is as lightweight as possible, because the ability to pivot based on new information, based on challenges that you get, is critical to success. And also to make sure that you have a continuous delivery of outcomes rather than focused on one big bang at the end, as that introduces significant risk. I'd like to especially thank Agile Brisbane Queensland and PMI Queensland for the opportunity to speak at your monthly events. And I'd also like to express appreciation to Queensland University of Technology for allowing me to present the project that I delivered there. And if you'd like to reach out to me to discuss anything further, please contact me on my LinkedIn address, which is listed below. And looking forward to hearing of any thoughts that you might have about my presentation. Thank you so much. Bye.